Welcome everyone to our Future Ready Student webinar series. This is episode number 3, where we are gathering today to really talk about what does it mean to be future ready and be relevant in our AI world. Throughout this series, we have explored a human skills framework. We've talked about what it means to be relevant in an AI world. And today we are going to talk about what are the conditions that we need to build these human skills. I'm Dr. Michelle Amen, and I'm the Chief Academic Officer of ProSolve and the co-president of the Human Intelligence Movement. And Travis, I'll invite you to introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, glad to be here. My name is Travis Allen. I'm the CEO and co-founder of ProSolve. I'm also the co-president of the Human Intelligence Movement with Michelle here. Glad to be here.
And Travis and I are really excited today to bring 2 guests to the conversation that are superintendents in California doing this work each and every day. So it is my pleasure to introduce first Dr. Julian Lee, who is the superintendent of Buena Park School District, and also Dr. Jason Johnson, the superintendent of El Segunda United. Let me start over. El Segunda. Now I'm going to just trip. Help me out, Jason.
It's actually very not Spanish. It's El Segundo.
Oh, see, I was trying to add that layer of Spanish onto it. El Segundo Unified School District. Welcome, Jason and Julian, to our conversation. And we want to just kind of get things started by getting to know each other a little bit before we dive into talking about human skills and the conditions. And I have a question to open with. What is a show or a book or an album, a podcast that you've been obsessed with lately? And I'll go first because mine was super easy. I have been just binge watching The Pit. Has anybody seen that show? Okay, so it's set up kind of unique. It's like, the whole series is one day in the life of an ER doctor. So like every episode is an hour in time. And so the whole series is one day. And I don't know, I'm in love with it. I could probably go be an ER nurse at this point because I've just been watching episode after episode after episode. Who else has an obsession that they want to share?
I'll jump in. It just reminds me of the show 24. For anyone who watched 24, I love that one growing up. Same concept. It's minute by minute, the whole experience.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you my recent obsession that my wife and I are watching, and that is Love on the Spectrum. It is really fascinating, especially as we think about having conversations on human skills and just watching. The premise of the show is that people on the spectrum and the challenges and struggles that they go through in trying to form relationships with people and partners. But it's been really, really fun to watch.
That's great. How about you, Jason?
Yeah, so I'll go a different direction here, though I do love TV shows. And The Dream Hotel, written by Layla Lalami. The Dream Hotel is takes place in Southern California in the somewhat near future, where a woman is imprisoned in a private prison because her data score exceeds the limit where it triggers security measures that she may be a threat to murder her husband. They recently had just had a baby, and so she's clearly going through postpartum depression. And it really starts to get into the question of, we have credit scores right now already, which dictates so much of your life. And so with analytical data collection, that you would start to produce a risk score. And to me, it's not a very techie book, and that's why it's good.
Yeah.
She's written a lot of other great literature, but it takes on a subject that feels very, very real and present.
So do you think it could ever happen?
I think it's already happening.
I'm seeing some nods from Travis, right? There too. All right, thanks for that great title. I'll have to look it up. How about you, Julian?
My guilty pleasure is scrolling through TikTok. I've been really obsessed with fusion cooking, so I'm really plugged into looking at new recipes that I can create, or I can just take to another level. So my latest obsession is Thai food, and so I've been experimenting on that front. So that's my that's my guilty pleasure. But I also do a good book read. I love to have a good book by my nightstand, and the current one I'm reading is Born to Fly. It's a book that our students are reading for our pentathlon competition. Our school was able to, Beatty Middle School, hit second place national last year, and we qualified again this year. So we're hoping to do wonders with the competition, but I do want to be able to at least connect to some of those questions they throw out there by reading the book alongside the kids.
What a great way to build connection alongside your students. I do have to know, do you have a TikTok channel?
I'm a consumer, not a creator, but I'm building up the courage to one day get there.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, again, thank you both for joining us today in this conversation that we are going to have. And really, we've been on a journey discovering what does it mean to really create conditions to establish future-ready students. And it really begins first and foremost with knowing where you want to go. And here at ProSolve, we have developed a framework that has defined 12 essential human skills that we believe all students, all educators, all leaders need to stay relevant in today's world. And I want to just show you here an image of our human skills framework. And when we think about this framework, it has been designed intentionally to think, like I said, about what are those important essential skills that we need. And we categorize them around humans who connect, humans who solve, and humans who adapt. And within those domains, we've identified interpersonal skills, which are really our 4 C's fit in here. Communication, collaboration has always been a skill that we believe students and adults need. But we've also added here social awareness, that ability to read a room and really understand other people's perspective and have empathy for one another. And as we evolve in our AI world, that is going to be key. We look over here with humans who solve, and we have defined that category with those cognitive skills, critical thinking, creative thinking, systems thinking. But as we move out of a knowledge era into the intelligence age, these skills really have evolved from acquiring information to being able to use that information with judgment, discernment, to be able to solve problems, think outside the box. And that systems thinking there is a little bit unique and purposefully placed because we believe that our world is going to need people who can really connect the dots among problems in society and be able to think about how do pieces move to a whole and how can that systems thinking parallel with that creative thinking to solve novel problems. But when we look at the bottom of our framework, we think about humans who adapt. And I think Travis and I would agree that this is probably one of our most underutilized skills in today's world, whether it's students or whether it's adults, those interpersonal skills, really knowing yourself, really being able to manage your emotions, and also being able to be efficacious and feel like you can go on and tackle hard things each and every day. So that interpersonal category. And then in a world that changes every single day, those learning skills to be curious about what don't I know, what do I need to explore, but also to have perseverance and resilience when things don't always go as we planned or things don't always go our way. How do we bounce back and recover and keep being motivated and persevering? And so we think about this as a very holistic approach to human skills, but then we also see how it parallels with other areas that we've commonly talked about in our schools. And Travis, do you want to elaborate a little bit on some of the connection points? And then as he does, what we're going to come back and do is talk about what skill do you believe kids need the most to be relevant in today's world, and what skills do adults need as well? So Travis, talk us through some of the connection points.
Yeah, when we started working with districts and talking about these human skills, what we saw kind of was missing is a united front of many initiatives. There are districts who have almost pockets siloed, building different areas, and we have maybe a focus of SEL in a certain state over here, and then another area where we're talking about the 4 Cs. Maybe we're adopting a portrait of a learner, and there wasn't really this kind of bring it all together, catch-all concept, and that's where the human skills concept was born for us, is that we see it being so important to kind of unite all of these soft, durable skills under one front, and it can fit many of your strategic initiatives as a district. At the end of the day, what we're aiming towards what are the uniquely human skills that can't be replaced by AI and technology, that the workforce will still demand and require as our kids graduate and leave high school. And that's what this was designed to be, is kind of that space to become that guiding North Star to help districts think about what's relevant, what's important.
So as we look at these human skills, and I'll give you one more chance to kind of take in what we say is really important in today's world, I invite you to share what do you all think? Like, what is the most urgent skill that kids need to have today and in the next 5 years, and why are you picking that one over the others? Who wants to start with what they think?
I can go ahead and start. I'm a former principal of a school that we led this computer science pathways program. And so in each grade level, we focused on progressive skills in coding, but it wasn't coding for the sake of coding. It was for developing computational skills, understanding of algorithms and conditional statements. But where that went in application was the industry in the field. So robotics, AI, augmented reality. We did amazing things at the school. And so leading a school of that caliber and the expectations to produce, win competitions and go to, robotics competitions and place first was always kind of a part of the fabric of the school. However, we go to this competition and a group of kids face a challenge where their coding was knocked off due to the lighting of the auditorium, and it totally messed up everything that they had planned in terms of this competition. And at that pivotal moment, you have kids falling apart. They don't know how to reprogram, how to work together to solve this problem. You have parents looking at us, the educators, going, do something. We're looking at the parents going, do something. You have kids fighting over the robots, pulling it, going, give it to me, I'll do it. Give it to me, I'll do it. And we realized something that day. All of these endeavors to put the tools in the hands of kids, to develop these skill sets along the way, we were missing a critical factor. And that is giving opportunities for kids to be able to build the resilience over time, to build the camaraderie, the relationships needed to navigate a situation where communication is needed in application and not just by theory. So I just wanted to say how important those human skills are in application. They are very lofty words. They're huge words. And they're not the first time we're seeing it as educators. You have the 4 Cs. You have it floating around in mission statements. Our mission statements of that school captures the 4 Cs. But we realize something. If the adults don't intervene in creating these learning environments for kids to prepare them, sometimes we miss the mark. And so maybe we have missed this one if we're not training our kids to be able to take the risk to fail and fail forward and to do it again and to go back and have the conversations needed to unlock a lot of these things in discovery, what it means for them to stay innovative. And so, just wanted to throw that out there, just a little piece of my story, my history, and why this work is so important to me.
I absolutely love that. And thank you for that story, because I think it really painted the picture for us. I mean, I could just see these kids argue, like the world is coming to an end and they're arguing over the robot and don't know how to be resilient. And I think you said something that is so key, and that is the application, not the theory. Like, we can talk a lot about the failing forward and taking risks and being resilient, but it's when you're put into the situation where you actually have to apply that, where really it's at the test of, do you have the skill or not? Fantastic. Jason, how about you? What is the most urgent skill you think kids need to have?
I'm gonna group think it and follow Julian because I also agree that it's resilience. I do think that one of the reasons it's resilience though because it's something that's very hard for schools to simulate. That and I think you're like, oh, what do you mean? Like, school is such a challenge. To me, school can be and generally is a very linear challenge. If you think about most of it's based on completion or completing tasks, and it's very hard to simulate something going wrong with the task. Like a science experiment. You mean like they were like, oh, we have like science projects, but even that, you mean like you're typically not actually like working through the experiment. You're just modeling an experiment. So I point that one out because that's why I sometimes think there's this disconnect between workplace and educational environments, because workplaces possess a lot of setbacks because there's a lot of variables that happen within that. And schools do possess those setbacks and variables, but they typically don't take place within the academic work. It's what we call school life. That you mean like all kinds of challenges and setbacks happen during the course of the day in school. They're just generally not part of the academic learning. So yeah, I pose that as a challenge to ourselves that you mean like generating resilience. You mean like within the actual instruction itself. I think there's been attempts like project-based learning and such, but I still think it's something we're reckoning with as an academic environment.
Well, you've helped me answer something that I've been grappling with for a long time, and that is how is it that we ask kids to fail, but yet when we grade on an A through F, it's seen as bad or negative. So like, do we really believe we're asking them to try something and fail because our grading would say we wouldn't want that to happen?
Yeah. The tradition of the system itself does not lend itself well to false starts. And there's also, because there's a breadth of information to cover as well too, a lot of it's knowledge gain or knowledge bank versus skill acquisition. I mean, these are old problems, but I agree with you that the way that it's graded, and still reinforced by the university system is extremely problematic. And if you look at elementary, where it's not subject to university-based acceptance systems, they've completely moved away from. I mean, the idea that you would do A through F in elementary among most progressive school districts would be ludicrous. The only reason that we still possess it at high school is because of college admissions. That's why.
Yeah.
I've got two thoughts on it. First of all, I'm totally not surprised that both of you picked skills and concepts that are in the adaptability section, because the way I look at it is I can be successful in the workforce in life if I'm missing any of the top skills. I might be a really poor communicator, but I'm really creative and I can critically think and solve problems, or vice versa. I could be terrible at being creative, but man, can I collaborate and communicate with a group of people to accomplish the impossible. And so when I think about those adaptability skills, they're often the hardest to cultivate, build in education and in society with intentionality from the beginning. And I think part of the reason why is for us to develop resiliency, it would require us to pair groups of kids with the same kind of level of failure tolerance, and then put an experience where we know they're going to flex and develop that muscle. And that's crazy. We wouldn't create a subject called resiliency and then only put people of a certain caliber resiliency at it, and then give them a specific challenge. And as crazy as that sounds, that's literally what we do with math, science, and subjects and so on, right? So we try to pinpoint, you're here at math, you're here at math, we're going to put you in the same class. And I think the reality of what we have to realize is for us to develop adaptability skills, we have to create a learning environment that meets kids where they're at, that everyone can be at a different pace. To be adaptable means to put me in a situation that is slightly above my ability, my means of whatever it might be, to where I might hit some struggle and failure along the way. Well, that's going to be a very personal journey for every individual. And the only way we're going to create that is if we allow kids to create and carve their own path of discovery and growth off of the contingency, though, that they want to develop those skills. Because if I don't want to build my resiliency, why would I try to do hard things? tell me how to get the A, give me the path of least resistance, and that's what I'm going to accomplish. So I think that's what we're faced with, is those adaptability skills at the end of the day are what matter so greatly. And it is hard at times to simulate and artificially create environments to foster them.
We're definitely on track to talk about what are those conditions that we need in our classrooms, in our schools, in our teams to build those skills. I just want to, before we go there, just say that, you know, our members joining us today in the conversation are really echoing what we've all said around resiliency, around the need to not be so afraid to fail, to really step into doing hard things. So we're seeing that echoed through those joining us today. Also, there were a couple of more book suggestions. So check back out the chat. That the club was mentioned, and Ellie Langley's new album was mentioned. So now you got a couple more things for your list. Thanks to those of you who are joining us and contributing to the conversation. That's one of the best parts about this conversation, is it's not just the four of us, but it's everyone who is joining us today. So let's talk about those conditions. All right. So at ProSolve, we really believe that it takes a unique set of learning conditions to build human skills. And many of the things that you've described started to touch on what we believe it means to create the conditions. And I would argue that I'm going to talk about conditions that the classroom needs, but then we can also think about conditions the school needs, and even conditions our teams need, whether it's a PLC team, whether it's a leadership team, really to thrive and build on those human skills. So this graphic represents how we think about the learning conditions. And if we start with student driven, that is really the ownership of learning, how students feel like they own their learning. And as I talk about these conditions, I want you to really be thinking about, what do you believe in most deeply? Because that's what I'm going to ask you next. Is what do you believe in most deeply, and where have you seen these conditions come to life? So in that student driven, we think again about ownership of learning. And Travis, you hit on something here. It needs to be relevant. Students need to care about what they're learning, motivated to do hard things, to feel like they have agency to solve problems, add value to the world, that they aren't just doing, Jason, what you said around moving through content. Wouldn't it be great if a science experiment was truly a science experiment and wasn't just replicating or modeling, but they were able to own, I'm wondering about this and I want to see what happens. And through that also comes reflection. And that is so important to tap into the thinking about the thinking, the experience where you're at the robotics fair. It sounds like you stopped and really reflected on what happened at that and what were maybe some of the things they could do differently next time. So we think about the student driven. We also think about human-centered classrooms, and we know that learning is social. We learn best by talking with one another, teaching one another. And so we definitely need that social connection where we're working in small groups and teams or with pairs. And we also, though, in order to have that, need to have psychological safety. So whether, again, it's the classroom or our team, we need to know that it's okay to take a risk. It's okay to say we don't know. It's okay to try something and fail. And also and have that psychological safety to know that we all have different worldviews and different perspectives, and those are valued and a part of the classroom. And that really creates that belonging feeling. We all want to feel like we belong in a space, and that condition helps us to really thrive and learn. And then our last section is really around experiential. We believe that learning has to be hands-on. It has to be play-based, inquiry-based. That's where kids really, where you can maximize that relevancy, that social connection, all of those other pieces. It also has to be real world. There's so much compliance-based learning where students are asked to just go through the motions of learning, versus really, really having a piece in their learning, giving something back to the world. And through that creates that growth mindset that feeds that agency, right? So I know that I can conquer this, I can do the next thing. So when we think about these conditions, I'm really curious, what stood out to you? Which of these conditions do you really believe in most deeply, and that we need to have to build these human skills? Who wants to jump in there first?
I'm all about the experiential learning. That stands out to me very distinctly. We have a program in one of our middle schools. It's an agricultural sciences program where kids, yes, are learning about future farmers of America and how to sustain food growth, but sustainable energy as well. But we recently got a grant by the OC Power Authority to include solar powered irrigation system. So you're looking at sustainable energy that comes alongside hands-on experiential learning. And in that intersectionality of our world that comes into play, where we're not just talking about sustainable foods, but the sources of energy that promote that, it's incredible to give that platform to a student, see what they do within that learning environment. So you have the hands-on that meets the technology. I'm so excited to even think about how they'll manipulate AI in that context as well, to utilize as a powerful tool in that mix. But the students in that environment are allowed to think outside of the box of what works and doesn't. And in that too, they partner with the Second Food Harvest to plant seedlings, so that not only do they grow it here in our greenhouse, they give back to the community, and it returns back to our farmers market to be able to provide to our community. So along the layers, I mean, you're just layering all this together, community service alongside integration of technology, alongside a learning environment that's experiential and hands-on, come together and meet as a force in intersectionality. So when I look at those words, they stand out to me in application of a program that we have distinctively here. It gets me super excited about what we can do when we apply that to mathematics, when we apply that to science, when we apply that to other curricular areas. But that inquiry and play looks different in kindergarten, and it looks different in middle school. So it's kind of us to figure out that age appropriate, yet thinking outside of the box in that +1 model of not always determining the solution and the answer, and let the kids discover that pathway itself.
And I'll just kind of add on to that. I want to echo parts of experiential learning. I think I look at my own journey in K-12, and I think if you ask most people, what are the pieces you remember? What are the pieces you felt prepared you for life today? And what really set you up for success? Mm-hmm. Almost every time you're going to get people saying, oh, it was debate club, it was band, it was that we designed a board game and played with our friends, it was the science fair. And they're pretty much going to long list experiential learning things that they did in their K-12. And we've been doing those for a really long time. The argument is that in a post-AI world, it's even more important that we do and focus on those things. I want to shift though and talk about student-driven learning, because to me, that one is a huge piece that I also feel like we fall short on in education the most out of this list at times. And here's why I think about that. I look at things through the lens of the workforce. So I'm in the workforce. I have teammates that I work with, and we try to be as productive humans as possible in getting the job done. And there's ownership of your work in the workplace that happens, just like students have to own their work. And what I mean by that is, for the longest time, most of the job force needed a lot of people who could follow a process and follow steps and deliver it with success. And so the concept was the manager had to be the smartest person in the room, and employees were there to follow the process of where the manager said, here's the goal, and I'm going to tell you how to get to goal. We now see the workforce shifted, where the manager is no longer the smartest person in the room. The employees are. The manager still says, here's where we need to go. I have no idea how to get there. And employees have to step up and say, I have to figure out the how. I have to invent my own path, my own ownership of my work to figure out the how. And I think the earlier we can help kids develop that skill of having that ownership, the better prepared they'll be in the workplace. When I think about the conditions of learning, and why I really like this concept of conditions, if I lead a team, I am actually not responsible for the outcomes of that team. The team members are responsible for their outcomes. I feel like as a leader, I should be measured on my ability to create the conditions that allow for peak performance to occur in any team or any environment. And that's what we're really getting at the heart here. If we want kids to develop these human skills, the best way we can think about for our teachers and our administrators is how are we creating the conditions that will give the chance for kids to show up and perform their best ability, their best self. So that's what comes to mind for me.
Well, and I think when we have been in such a compliance-based, and that the teacher is the one that knows the answer and is guiding the learning, that to even what you say, Travis, to step back and have ownership, to not always know, is very different for our teachers, and I think can be sometimes a little bit scary or unsure on if they will meet the end destination that way. And so I think when I think about the conditions, I think that is one of the most important and maybe one of the most challenging to create in the classroom. Jason, what are you thinking about?
Yeah, so for me, it's any conditions that create growth mindset, and I do think that has to be explicitly taught. It's great when it's modeled well, but I think that like explicit teaching of growth mindset within multiple scenarios is essential. And so to me, I don't think the examples need to be high tech. I was in a classroom a couple weeks ago, and they were doing peer editing, something that we've all seen many times. However, the student independence and what they were able to do with peer editing had clearly been practiced a lot. You mean, the efficacy of how to give feedback. You mean, like, how much feedback to give. You mean, like, following up in order to support that feedback. It was very, very explicit. This is a very talented teacher. And so, what became very clear is that the primary focus of the activity actually isn't the writing standard. That's just sort of like a secondary outcome. It really was about being able to collaborate and give critical feedback, and then to act on that critical feedback collaboratively. Because I think that all too often what happens is that those, you do a peer feedback, but you never actually engage with the peer, right? So like you get, like their paper, you mean like you put some marks on it, and then we get back. I mean, in a lot of ways, this is also how we teach as well. And so the thing that was, I think what sets it apart is that the teacher was actually teaching like how the students would work through that feedback together and collaborate in order to like make those adjustments and how to deliver from beginning to end. I mean, that's a very marketable skill. I would challenge, I'd say most adults struggle with that skill. But that is, like, to me, explicit teaching of growth mindset. The ability to collaborate and to think about like how someone else's thoughts about your work can improve them. I mean, like, the definition, and then, giving like the actual skill set to go through that. So I think that's an example where you can still hit the standards of education, but then it's like you're really, really thoughtfully doing well the more important thing. You mean, like, which with respect to writing, but the ability to collaborate, you mean like as a human, you mean like, person to person is the most important.
Here's what I wonder, Jason, in that situation is, tell us about like the human-centered nature of that classroom, because I would have to think that there'd have to be a high level of psychological safety and feeling of belonging. Did you get that sense that to be able to do what you described, did that exist as well?
Yeah, I do think that's easier to attain at an elementary level. This was a 5th grade classroom. Yes, this is a very strong teacher, and a lot of classroom norms go around building like this classroom community to set that up. I think where that becomes harder is at higher levels that are more specialized and subject based. But I also think too that one of the issues is that we've gotten so deep into specialization of subjects that we've like lost sight of like core skills, or human-centered learning. That's a different conversation. But I do feel like that the beauty of elementary is it creates conditions for more human growth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Just because of the nature that we aren't in a bell-to-bell schedule, we can create a classroom community in many ways. I want to go back to something, Travis, you said around the conditions that leaders need to create. So whether, your example was very much about the workforce and what are the conditions leaders create as a manager for their team. But I think we can, talk about this globally, like as leaders of a school district, what are some of the ways that you build the conditions in your teams so that then teachers or principals can build in the conditions for teachers and teachers can build for students? Talk to us a little bit about what does this work require to create these conditions as a leader?
I'll start on this one. Again, I always look at this through the lens of my own experience in the workplace and how do we prepare students for it. And so I think of growing and developing a sales team, and I'm going to use this as an example. What we've done in the past, a couple decades ago, is you give a script, you tell a salesperson, make your 50 calls. Here's the feed, of people you're going to call. You're going to read this script, follow this process, and you will find success. And again, the workforce doesn't do that anymore. It's more about you've got to use your critical thinking, your creative ingenuity to find out how do you best approach this. And it requires a completely different set of skill sets to be adaptable on your feet as a salesperson. So how does this relate to a teacher? Well, I would argue that if we want our teachers to foster and build human skills, there is no script we can give our teachers. We cannot say, here's how you exactly go about working with your kids to build resiliency. The journey of building human skills requires the facilitator's ability to be adaptable, adjustable, creative in their endeavor to build human skills. So the workforce, teachers included, are being pushed more and more to have a lot more freedom, autonomy, flexibility in the workplace and determine the best approach to accomplish the goal. So if what I think about creating conditions is how do we allow less hand-holding and handcuffs to our teachers on how to do their job, where everything's kind of spoon-fed for them, and instead empower them, celebrate them, and give them opportunities to find creative approaches. You have the destination well defined as the leader. Kids must be able to perform this level of cognitive skill set. From there, give some freedom back to that teacher to know their students deeply and understand what makes them tick and what they need to be successful.
Yeah.
I think, sorry, Jay, I was just going to point out what Victoria said in the chat that kind of supports where you were going, Travis, around owning a task. Like, I need to make a slide deck is very different than owning an outcome. Like, I need to communicate this concept. And I think even a parallel as a leader, what are you asking people to do? And for teachers, are you scripting exactly what they need to do? Or are you giving them the goal, the outcome, the end destination, and using their brilliance, letting them use their brilliance to get there? Jason, what were you going to offer?
I don't think there's like a sexy answer here. That this is like an overtime working with your staff, building relationships. And these are things that are hard to come by. Shared collaborative leadership. Principal longevity is another aspect of this. Because I do feel like a lot of like setting these conditions. I think in this case, staff to staff does have to be modeled, and the staff has to consciously choose to value these things and try to practice them, and integrate them into their instruction daily because it's hard. So I don't think that there's a clean program answer to this question.
So it's really, I'm hearing like modeling them as a leader. Like if you think about ownership and human-centered and experiential, like modeling that for your staff and building that over time is maybe a little bit of what I'm hearing. Julian, how about you?
Yeah, I've been blessed to have great leaders model a lot of great traits. I've seen successful teams, and when you look deeper within the teams to say, what's the magic secret sauce? You find that the employee has a part or a part to a whole. So they feel connected to the purpose, to the journey, and they feel like they're a contributor to that. And so it's like meaningful, purposeful, driven teamwork also produces happy people on the team. And the second part to that is appreciation for the work you do. And it doesn't have to come in a daily thank you. It's not just a validation constantly to say, oh, I'm going to validate your work, that you're doing a great job, but it's also validated through autonomy, through trust, to be able to have a safe environment where you can come up and say, hey, I thought about this, maybe I can do this a little better, right? So that value, we have to break down meanings like that, because I think they mean different things to different people. But typically when I see like happy teams and they're making this synergistic monumental progress, you look deep within to say, wow, the commonalities of successful teams come within a purpose-driven environment where you feel connected and you see that your identity as to that part, and also that your work is valued because your voice is valued. And I don't expect anything different from a classroom. I feel like I walk in, and I don't mean this in any disregard, but my mind goes to, so what? So what? So we have this instruction happening in the classroom. What is the impact to the kids, and what are the kids thinking at that moment? So you can talk about student engagement, and you can see they seem to be engaged, but are they truly engaged? Is their voice being valued? Are they making a contribution to the purpose-driven goals in that classroom? Do they feel validated because their voice is heard? So we say leaders in the field and we model them. Teachers are leaders in their classroom. Yeah. This needs to be, as Jason mentioned, explicitly modeled and taught. And it goes the same in the workforce. I feel like, once again, I've been blessed to see many leaders in action model this. And then right alongside them, not behind them, is their team to feel as though they're a part of that whole mission-driven purpose.
Well, I hear you putting a huge premium in leadership today on the human-centered environments, both in the workforce and the classroom. And I think that's going to be more relevant than ever, because what I'm finding is more and more we can solve our problems with just interacting with AI and getting the task, the job, the outcome done. But what we are losing in that process is the thing that often keeps us going. It's the human connection. It's the belonging. It's the feeling like you're a part of a team, feeling that you are having, connections built with other humans, I think is very inherent to us as humans and what we need. And so we don't want to lose that. And that might be the value we need to create as leaders, to say, hey, you might be out there cranking out, performance and success, but I want to make sure I create the conditions for us to have that human-centered connection opportunity for you as individuals.
Well, you're tapping into a great next topic, I think, around what does it mean to be human and continue to have that connection and those human advantage in our world that's changing. Well, as we are out of time, I can't believe this conversation has been just really amazing. I have learned so much. I have so many takeaways personally. I want to thank you, Dr. Johnson and Dr. Lee and Travis, for joining the conversation today, just bringing kind of the stories of success in your districts, but also some of the things that make it hard to do this work and to really stay focused on building those human skills and creating the conditions for students, teachers, principals. So thank you so much for being with us today. We are going to put a link in the chat that just gives you an overview of these conditions, how we believe that student-driven, human-centered, and experiential learning are really the secret sauce that classrooms need, that schools need to build those human skills. And so that is coming here for you to take a look at and take away with you. Jason, Julian, Travis, any final words or thoughts that you want to share with folks watching today?
Hard work, keep at it.
Yes, absolutely. Ditto that.
I'll say one thing real quick, Michelle, that what I reflect on this, I think it's interesting to start asking ourselves, what are the conditions we currently create that stifle human skills? And I actually think it's almost easier to sit here and list all the ways that we're currently creating conditions that are completely counterintuitive to building resilient kids who want to do hard things, who show up curious and hungry to learn, who want to, connect with their peers and solve really great problems.
Yeah, that would be a great conversation too, to talk about what we need to stop doing so that we can start doing different ways. Well, thank you everyone who joined the conversation today. The insights were amazing. Really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. And we look forward to continuing to really explore what it means to create future ready students. So thanks everyone for joining us today.
Thank you.